Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're about to have Rayanne Cook with PowerSchool with us doing PowerSchool SIS for administrators, and I'm going to turn it over to Rayanne now. Thank you for joining us today.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm sure most of you have heard from me in my weekly office hours. I'll go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about PowerSchool Administrator and some things that you need to know as we're getting ready to start your first year of school working with PowerSchool. Just a little background on me. I've worked with PowerSchool for 13 years. I've had the role of, started as an implementation project manager, and then I went to be a PowerSchool SIS product manager. And I left my product management role to work on the Alabama statewide implementation. This is my third statewide implementation of PowerSchool. I also worked on the South Carolina and North Carolina implementations. Prior to that, I worked as a PowerSchool administrator in Missouri for 8 years. So if you add those years up, I've been using the PowerSchool application since the end of 1999. And I've used it as a teacher, an administrator in my former life. And now I am working with the company and have been for the past 13 years. I live in Gulf Breeze, Florida, so as everybody likes to call it, Lower Alabama. And you can see my two children there, Rudy and Holly. They're loads of fun. And we'll get going with the agenda. The topics we're going to be going over is things that you need to review when you're preparing for a new school year. And the new school year is information that you should review after you've completed your end of year, every school year with PowerSchool. It's just verifying that all your data is set up, any changes that you need to make for the upcoming school year are made. And then we're going to go through some troubleshooting of some different go live scenarios that you may run into and how you can resolve them. And you're going to be storing grades for the first time in PowerSchool, probably at the end of your first quarter, the end of your trimester, whatever your organization is. And it's a different process in than it was in iNow. So our storing of grades is similar. It's what you have to do when you're posting the transcript. It's making a stored record of your grades. And so we're going to go over that process, and then we can have some questions at the end. When you're preparing for the new school year, some of the things that you need to think about and work on is within the district setup. Are my entry and exit and ethnicity codes correct? Are the years and terms, calendars, reporting terms, quick lookup preferences, or have all those been set up? Is your graduation planner set up and ready for you to use in the coming year? Reviewing your instant management, making sure that that setup is correct. And all of the school information for all of your schools lives in the district setup area. And also tests and GPA calculation methods. On a lot of these during the first year of implementation, you're going to be working with your application specialists, and they are going to be configuring a lot of this for you. But in the coming years, these are things that you're going to want to review and go over every year as you're starting a new year to make sure that you have the information that's necessary. For entry and exit codes and ethnicity codes, the state provides the codes, and we have a what we call an enterprise controller. And within that enterprise controller, all of the state codes are set up, and there's a sync that runs hourly. And every hour, if the state were to make a change at 9:15 to a exit code, either add it, delete it, something like that, it would be down in your instance at the 10 o'clock hour. It syncs on the hour, every hour from 9 a.m. To 11 p.m. And you're going to want to, that's how the entry exit codes and a lot of the codes work within Alabama. And you can review that setup within PowerSchool, but you can't edit or delete any of that setup. The next area that we're going to talk about that needs to be set up is your years and terms, calendars, reporting terms, and quick lookup preferences. PowerSchool has a tool called Batch School Setup. And what it allows you to do is allows you to push at the district the setup information to all of your schools for the years and terms, calendars, and reporting terms, and the quick lookup page preferences. So it's a tool that you can configure once if everything is the same. If it's not, if you're a large LEA and you have 25 elementary schools and they have the same setup, you're going to be much better off configuring the years and terms once and at one school and being able to push that out to the 24 other elementary schools. And then, you know, maybe you have 10 middle schools, configure one and then push that out to all of the other schools. And that's what this tool allows you to do. And I'm going to go into that, how Batch School Setup works. This is the screen within PowerSchool, and there's a screen where you can go through the different items that are a part of it. The first one is the years and terms. And while you can skip through different processes, they do impact some of the other processes that you're working on. You can't configure the calendar or the reporting terms without configuring the years and terms first. And you can't configure the quick lookup settings without configuring the reporting terms. So there is some sense to the order. While you can work on pieces and parts of them at any time, it allows you to, you could configure years and terms, calendar, reporting terms, and quick lookup, and just push it to one set of schools or one school. You don't have to do it all in at one time. So with that's just something that you have to think about, you know, the order of things, and it works in that process. And you get to it by going to district office, clicking on district setup. There's a Batch School Setup screen, and run the setup steps, and it takes you to this screen that allows you to configure. The process works the same for most of the items. You select your source school, and that is the school that you're going to put if we're working with years and terms, you're going to put the years and terms for that school in, and then you're setting that up just like you were on school setup and putting in years and terms for their school. And then the next step of the process is you select which schools you want to push the settings to. You can use filters to find those. There's a category that can be set up at the school level, so you can put all your high schools in a category, all your middle schools, all your elementaries, so you can push it in groupings. And then the last step is to push the desired settings. You're going to select your schools based on where they apply. So you're going to group based on how the scheduling practices, like if you have some schools that do a 2 cycle day schedule and another school that does a 1 cycle day schedule, you're going to have to consider that when pushing the setup. The groups that you're pushing and using batch school setup, they need to be consistent because you're copying that information to each school. So the settings need to be consistent between the schools you're copying to. And once you push, those settings are immediately applied to the school setting. And then you could go and review those at the school settings. And on the batch school setup page, there is a screen that shows you a green arrow pops, a green check mark pops into the screen when you have completed the setup for that item. So once you have completed setup, and here's your screen for the push of the years and terms. So you chose the source school, and on the batch school setup screen, it allows you to create the school year, and the screen is the same as you would see at the school if you were creating years and terms. But you can create it at the district office and set that up and then push it out to the schools. The years and terms, as long as their classes are the same length, because that's what you have to consider when you're setting up years and terms is, do I offer only year-long classes? Do I have year-long semester classes? Am I offering quarter classes? Because you're going to have to set up all of your terms. Terms are based on the length of a class. If you don't have quarter classes and teach quarter length classes, you do not need to set those up at within the years and terms. We'll talk about the reporting bins here in a little bit. That's where you set up the grades that are going to be collected. This is just the length of the scheduling. So you can set that up and push it out to the schools that you want to. The next, following on with the years and term, the next item within the batch school setup is the calendar. So, but the calendar has setup items that you have to configure at the district office in order to push the calendar. The calendar has cycle days, bell schedules, in session, and membership. Those are the 4 required pieces of the calendar. So as we talked about at the beginning, you have to have those consistent between all of your schools in order to push the calendar setup. So I'm going to go in. At the district, you have to create bell schedules. So if you have bell schedules at your schools, and in order to push out to the schools, the names need to be consistent. You have to create the bell schedule and cycle days at the district level in order to push them out to the schools. So the steps you'd go through is you're going to create the bell schedules, create the cycle days, then create the calendar, and then set up the calendar with those in-session days and the membership. And we have the automated calendar configurator that you can use to set up your calendar on a pattern. And then after you have completed that setup, you would push that calendar out to all of the schools. The next item that you can use the batch school setup to push is to set up the reporting terms for multiple schools. And looking at the screen, this is the same screen that is the reporting terms, final grade bins that you can set up at each school level. It's a school level setup item. And what this does is for all of the years and terms that you've set up, and the years and terms show on the screen, if it's a year-long class, you would set the final grades that you're going to grade on within that year-long class. So you might have a Q1, a Q2, a Q3, a Q4. You might have an S1, an S2, and then you might have a F1 for the final grade. You might have an X1 for the exam grade. These final grade and reporting terms, we are keeping the final grades consistent across the state and the reporting terms, because within Alabama, we're going to be transferring historical grades, which are your stored grade records, between LEAs. And so we need to keep these reporting bins consistent so that we can pull that onto a transcript that you have locally. So using the same reporting bins will keep all of your historical grades for the students within the same buckets. So you'll know that your final grade, whether it's a quarter-length class, a semester-length class, or a year-long class, is going to be a F1 or it's going to be an F2, depending on when it is, so that it's easier for you to build your transcripts and your report cards. All of the setup items that I have went through, the years and terms, calendar setup, and reporting terms, all of those can only be pushed from district office once. If there is a change that needs to be made, that change has to be made at the individual school level. The system will only allow push of those settings one time. And so if you've done that once, you won't be able to go back into batch school setup and push it out again for those 3 settings. And that little grid, you have a grid that appears when you go to the batch school setup screen. It will have a check mark next to, the years and terms column for that school's been pushed. The reporting term for that school's been pushed. So if it has a green check mark, it's been pushed for that school, and you will not be able to push from the district for those items again. You can only do one push. Now, the last item that you can push from the batch school setup is the quick lookup screen. And that quick lookup screen is the screen that is a part of every portal: the admin portal, the teacher portal, the parent and student portals. All of them have in common a screen that shows the students' grades and the students' attendance, a summary of all their classes. That's a screen in all of the portals. So this screen, this quick lookup, it can be pushed many times. It just replaces what's there anytime you push it. And this is a screen that you will probably want to manage throughout the year. Like the screen what you're going to be changing is the source of the data. Currently, if you look at the screenshot I have there, it's going to be showing the current grade that's coming from the teacher's grade book. After you have stored grades for Q1, you're going to want to go in and update the source of data to the stored grades so that it'll push the grade that's been stored for that class instead of pulling from the teacher's grade book. So this is a screen that you may want to visit and update after Q1. You may update and visit it at different times for different schools, depending on when you've stored their grades. So this is something that you can push numerous times. It updates what's there, and you would always be pushing it from the batch school setup screen to push it out. So this you will use throughout the year. The others are just for your initial setup at the beginning of the school year. And after that, those have to be managed at the school level. The other things that are a part of district setup that is important to consider when you're reviewing your looking at the start of year. The graduation planner. The ALSC is providing the setup for the state requirements in Alabama for graduation. I did an office hours on the graduation planner on Tuesday. And if you're familiar with the office hours sheet, if you're not, ask one of your tech coordinators that's on the biweekly emails, that newsletters that has the link to it. If you want to learn more about the graduation planner, you can go to the office hours sheet and review the recording. But PowerSchool will be setting up the state requirements. An LEA can have stricter requirements than the state, and you can copy the state provided one and make changes if you have different local requirements for graduation. But we will be providing that setup, and that'll be configured in your instances in probably the coming month. It'll be there and you'll be ready to use it when school starts. Incident management, that is another area that the state is providing the incident setup, and it's being pushed down to all of your instances, and it cannot be modified other than adding any LEA subcodes under the local use for action codes and the local use for behavior. So any LEA specific codes need to be under the local use subcode code, and then you can set up subcodes within that. So your application specialists have been working with you on getting that configured, and that's something that will need to be configured to bring over the instant information from iNow that we're going to be starting working on in the coming weeks. The school information, that is the list of schools at your LEA. Your application specialist has been working with you, and if you have inactive schools that you have students that have an enrollment history at schools that are no longer active, those have to be added to PowerSchool. And your application specialist has probably reviewed a list of the closed schools that was provided by the ALSDE, And some of those may need to be added, maybe not all if they're, if they haven't been active in the last 5 years. But that's something that in order to get the accurate enrollment history, some closed schools will have to be added into PowerSchool. That school information is going to be populated and synced from the state's valid school list. And we will be starting that sync when we're going live in production in the next couple of months. We've been editing it during implementation, getting it set up based on the information. But when it goes live, there's going to be fields on that page that you will be able to edit, and other fields that you won't be able to, that will be just view only for, depending on if that's a field that the state has locked down or not. The tests are for the state test. We will be setting those up, and your application specialist should have been working with you to choose 4 of your local tests that they will help you configure. And then if you want any other local tests in your instance, that would be your responsibility to get set up. When you're working with PowerSchool, because the state also has analytics, which will have all of the test scores, you really need to think about, is this something that I need in my student information system? The main reason to have it there is if it's something that you're going to want to print on a report card, a transcript, or something like that. The GPA calculation methods, we've had a couple of office hours on that, and your application specialist has configured all of the state calculation methods on your instance, and should be, if you have any questions around that, you should be working with your application specialist. But that's something that you always want to think about when the year is starting. Do I need to make any changes to my GPA calculations for the next year? Is something changing? That a GPA is something that you never want to change once the year started. You don't want to change the requirements of a GPA because during the year, because you don't want the information that students are changing to change within the school year. But that's part of the review, is do I need to make any changes to my GPA calculation methods? The other big piece of setup that you need to think about when you're the start of school, everything I'm going over is something that every year you want to think about, is that ready? Am I ready with that? In that time between when you run the end of year process and when you start school the next year. You're going to want to set up any temporary data like activities. There is a clear activity function in PowerSchool. So when I run my end of year process, after I do it, I may want to clear all my activities out so I start fresh the next year. The daily bulletin, if you're using that, do you want to put a bulletin out there so that it's available? So when you are starting this school year, we're gonna think about the bulletins and the people that are responsible for each school's bulletin, and that information, that's setup that you want to clear out and put new things like that. A lot of times the bulletin items will build on each other, so you'll have the same item on the bulletin for like the entire first quarter, but then it may need to be changed in second quarter. You may have something there that you want people to know about, or it's a piece of information for the entire year that you would need to change for the next year. And if you wanted to, if you're using the substitute portal, you could change any of the sign-in settings for the sub. You can change the password. The sub portal has not been, I don't think is going to be used much in Alabama, but that's something that you need to check on those settings between years if you're going to use it. You have to make sure that your school calendars are correct. At the district level, we went through the batch school setup, and if you've configured and set them up, you can actually use batch school setup to verify all of your years and terms, calendars, and your grade terms. On that dashboard page that comes up when you go to batch school setup, and it lists all of the schools and has a green check mark for each school you've completed. The school name is a link, and the slide out drawer that comes out will show you the number of days in your calendar. It's going to give you a summary of everything that you push. You'll be able to see the grading terms you set up, the years and terms that you set up, and what's currently on your quick lookup screen. So it's a summary of all of your school setup information. So that's a very good place for, after your end of year process, to do a review of all of your setup. And the things to look for is, you know how many days are in your school year. Is it 180? Is it 170? Whatever the number is, the number of school days you're supposed to have in your calendar. If it's less than that, more than that, you know that school has a calendar issue. So that screen is a very good screen to use to verify all of the school setup information. And you can do all of the information on this screen, your school calendars, your years and terms, and your grading terms. Within school setup, the attendance setup is very important to review, and it's especially important for you guys this first year so that you know that you have the appropriate attendance codes. And attendance codes are one of the items that are being pushed from the state. There are some fields on the attendance screen, such as on the attendance code screen, whether a teacher can assign that code is up to the LEA control. But the codes themselves, the code and the description is locked down and not editable at the local LEA level. You have attendance code categories. Those have been set up on every site and they're consistent. There's 5 code categories that are set up within the state of Alabama. That's unexcused, excused, tardy, and those are PowerSchool SIS default categories that are set up that are used for a lot of our data access codes that are used in reporting on object reports and report cards and things like that. So those come a part of the system, and you should also have the it's contributing to truancy and not contributing to truancy is, I can't remember the exact words and I don't have them in front of me, but that's the basics of it. And Alabama has categorized the attendance codes to whether they contribute to truancy or chronic absenteeism. It's a chronic absenteeism contributor or a chronic absenteeism exempt. So those are the 2 Alabama categories that are a part of it. If your LEA, for some reason, would like to categorize attendance codes in an additional manner. Maybe you want to have a category for illness. Probably have a code for illness, so maybe illness is not, but maybe you could group your doctor's visits, and it's just a way to group attendance. And if you have need to create additional categories there, you can. You also need to look at your attendance conversions. Everybody in Alabama should be using the percent time to day attendance conversion, and it should be 51% would be equal to 1, and or less, it's 51% is present, less than 51% is 0 or absence for the day. So your students have to be present 51% of the day, whatever the length of the day is, in order to be considered present. And your conversions are set up that way, and it should be using percent time to day conversion. You're going to want to also look and verify the schedule setup, including which periods count for ADA. And the importance of that is you may have schedules within your day or periods that you're putting students into that is not part of your day that may not count for ADA, such as an after-school activity. If you put it on your schedule, that is something that you would not want those periods to count for ADA. And also, before, one of the other things that you need to work on during this time is if you need to update any reports or any reports year specific that you've customized. Are you changing your report card for this next year? Do you need to make changes to that? Do you need to start collecting any additional data? The time period between your end of year process and the start of school is when you want to be adding anything new. You don't really want to change pages or change reports that are going to be used in the following year during the school year. You want to know, have that pretty much laid down and get that done during the summer so that you're ready to start school. Okay, and here we're looking at the school setup and the years and terms, and this is the same screens that we looked at in the batch school setup, that it uses the school setup, but you're verifying the term dates are correct, the number of periods and the number of cycle days. And to change the number of periods and the number of cycle days where the edit school year, sometimes this is finding where that's at. It was like I made my first year as PowerSchool administrator, I forgot where to turn it. And I have to actually have a support case on file with PowerSchool that to find out where to change the number of periods. But in order to change the number of periods, you click on the link that is the year. So that you click on the 2020-2021, and as part of that edit school year page, it has the number of periods and the number of days. So since you do it so infrequently, it is commonly forgotten that's where you do it. But that is where you change the number of periods and the number of cycle days if you need to do that. Looking at the calendar, we mentioned this before, but the 4 critical items for the calendar is the cycle day, the bell schedule, whether school is in session, and the date and the membership value. In Alabama, if school is in session, your membership value will always be 1. The cycle day is part of your scheduling. You know, is this an A day or a B day? And the bell schedule tells the system what periods are meeting. So maybe on an A day, 1, 3, 5, and 7 meet. And on a B day, 2, 4, and 6 meet, or 2, 4, 6, and 8. However many periods you have in your schedule. But this calendar is very important to the attendance process. So the calendar tells the system what classes and what periods can take attendance for that day. But these are the 4 pieces of critical information for the calendar. You can set up the tracks in session if you utilize tracks. They're not critical and you don't have to have them. And the day type can also be set up, but it's not critical to the functioning of the system. The start of the school year is also a good time to verify student data. Check that your student data is complete. Run your enrollment audit reports to check your school and course enrollment audits. Search for any blank fields so you can find students with missing data. Examples on the screen is like if you have students without a date of birth, you can do the DOB equal blank, and it's going to find those students that don't have a date of birth. The full-time equivalency, that's very important in the calculation of attendance. So if the FTE ID is blank, or if it's an FTE ID for the wrong school year, that can cause some attendance problems. But any field, and within PowerSchool on the start page, you have a view student fields, or a field list, and you can go to any field in that and find any blanks. Sometimes some of the state fields, all of the state fields in PowerSchool will start with S_AL_ and then something, but you can do a search and filter to find all of the state fields, and then potentially search for any that you have some missing data. So that's a good, quick way to verify that that crucial student data is in your system and find all of your holes. If you have cleared out all of your activities, it's time to update student enrollments in activities. So, or are you going to add activities for this year that weren't there last year? The time between the end of your process and start of school is the time to be doing that stuff. And the key points in everything that we went through is, you know, configuring your district and school setups, your calendar scheduling, use batch school setup. It will save you time, and you will have more time in your day to do everything else. Grading and reporting, verify your district and school grade settings, that the Power Teacher Pro settings, if you're setting those up, if you're locking that. And reviewing your student data and looking at your enrollment audit reports to make sure that you don't have any enrollment inconsistencies. And I've just got a couple of scenarios as far as something that might happen and how you will fix it. If your teachers all of a sudden let you know that they can't take attendance, one thing, if the meeting attendance preferences not set under attendance preferences, they will not be able to take attendance. Your calendar has the correct cycle day and bell schedule. If that's not correct, it won't allow attendance. And confirm that the bell schedule has the right periods in it. And the other piece is make sure that attendance codes have the codes assigned for teachers to assign to students. You have a large attendance code list, and you have to designate which ones you would allow the teacher to assign on your attendance code list. Another scenario that we've talked about a little is your attendance reports are not calculating correctly. Again, that goes back to the calendar setup and the correct membership value being set up. All of those 4 fields are accurate, and confirming that the correct FTE is assigned to the students. A new FTE is assigned each school year during the end of year process. And new students that arrived, it's a part of the enrollment process. So if it's not correct, you're going to have attendance report issues. And confirm that your bell schedule is accurate, because that's, if it has overlap, it's going to have too many minutes, so attendance might not calculate correctly. If you have too many minutes being reported in your bell schedule, it's going to inflate your attendance numbers. And that's the type of thing that will cause attendance reporting issues. Now we're going to talk about the storing grades for the very first time at the end of the first quarter. Prior to storing the grades, under system reports, there is a section readiness report. And what that does is it allows you to see which teachers have signed off that their grades are ready to be stored. It's something that they do in their teacher grade book that, you know, my grades are ready. And you just, if you're going to use the section readiness, you need to make sure your teachers are trained in how to use the section readiness within their grade book to say my grades are complete and are ready to be stored. So after your teachers have confirmed it, then you're going to review the readiness on the system readiness report. And that's going to list out all of your teachers, whether they have confirmed, whether, you know, they've confirmed some of their classes. They'll all be listed out, and you'll be able to see whether the school is ready to be stored. Another important piece is the locked reporting term settings. I've reviewed the Power Teacher Pro settings in an office hour, so you can go there for more information about that. But the piece that's important is you need to give the teachers a warning, you know, in their, you know, the grade book is going to be locked for Q1 grades in 10 days, however long you're going to give them a warning, and then they will get that warning every time they open the grade book, so that they know that at a certain point, the grade book is going to be locked. I can't make any more changes to my grade book. Grades will be able to be stored. So you configure the locked reporting term settings within the district settings within Power Teacher Pro admin. And then that will let the teacher know when they need to be ready to store with their grades ready to be stored. The permanently stored grades is a process in PowerSchool that you go to within the system settings, and it's permanently stored grades is what the title. You pick the reporting term you're storing to, you pick the store bin, and then there's some includes and exclude statements that I want to just store currently enrolled students and the credit that you're awarding, all of that type of information. So it's very important because what you put on that screen is what's going to happen when you press the button. And speaking from experience, you may not get it right the first time, but you can restore grades. And when you restore, it updates what's there. And there's not any issues with storing again. It just updates what was stored. So, but you need to make sure you get your includes and excludes based on how your LEA operates. So you know what decisions you need to make as far as permanently stored grades. There's a lot of information within help, and there's also PD plus on the permanently stored grades process. And I believe I've covered that in an office hour, and if not, I will do it in the future. Now we have about 5 minutes left. So are there any questions out there?
We had one question. If someone would like, a couple of people would like you to share the presentation, if you're comfortable with that. I don't know what to this.
Yeah, I was planning on doing that. So we will definitely share the presentation so you have it.
Will the lock reporting and will it also lock school?
No, that is just a Power Teacher Pro lock setting. But for PowerSchool, the final grade calculation comes from PTP. It does not come from Schoology. Schoology is just the owner, if you're using it, of the assignment grades, not of the final grade.
Any more questions?
All righty. And we will give you 3 minutes back in your day.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. I will attach that PowerPoint presentation to this session. So if you come back here shortly, you should be able to see it and download it. We appreciate your time today, and I'm going to end the session now. Thank you for joining us.